This episode was recorded on March 27th. Welcome to the Polytopian Interviewer, where I interview people on their experiences and views on the Polytopia Discord community. I have Daddy Kiwi with me today. How are you?
I'm doing good today.
Interesting to find somebody from Alaska. Not a lot of people living in that state.
There's a lot more than you think.
Lots of oil and nothing, right? I don't know.
It's oil and snow.
Oh, okay, so I was half right. Let's get right into it. How did you first get into the Polytopia Discord?
I've always been someone who enjoys a more thoughtful look on games like this. I've played a lot of Civ and similar games of strategy genre like this, and a couple years ago I started searching around online to find Discord servers for Polytopia servers. I think the first one that I found was actually the original Reddit link for the original Diplotopia server that was created back in 2016, 2015 or so.
Wow.
And then shortly after that found the one now. But other than that, I think I ended up joining a couple of the other Polytopia servers just because I found them and I was like, why not? I'll join them. And that's kind of how I started getting into them. I've been playing the game since late 2016, but I didn't really get into the servers in Discord until maybe half a year ago to almost a year ago.
So you're one of the people that had only Kiku as the paid tribe?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty much the start of the game.
I've been around it for a very long time, but I didn't have that much player experience until when I started going into Discords and all that for the game. So it's a bit interesting to see the difference between playing against people and playing against bots, because there's such a difference in what your thought process has to be. But I think I'm starting to adjust to it well.
Yeah, I agree. It's a big difference.
I am very excited to see how they can tweak the AI to make it better.
Theoretically, they'll make it better eventually. It's not really high on their to-do list. They're making sure the game runs properly and all that first.
Yeah. I'd rather have that than bots, but I do believe that Zoya said that they have a plan to improve upon it, and I just don't know when. I don't think many people do, or anyone for that matter. But
Yeah, it's sometime after the
just whenever
aquarium
it happens.
rework, probably.
Yeah.
You mentioned a Diplotopia link. Were you active in that server a lot, or?
When I first joined Diplotopia, again, it was like 9 months ago or so to a year ago, if I had to guess. The server was pretty much dead when I first joined it. Like, there was no activity really, like a message maybe once a week or so.
Mm-hmm.
The main channels. I believe there were 3 games going on when I joined, but obviously you can't see game channels unless you're in them. So for me, it was like just a dead server at that point. I don't know how active it was in those channels at all. But people joining, it was pretty much just a dead server. I want to say maybe around October or September of 2021 was when it started to become a little bit active. The players who are actually already in the server. Randomly, I think the invite got out or something, or a lot of people found it on a different Polytopia server, and then the member numbers exploded randomly one day. And there was like 2 or 3 games where the people were joining in the span of 10 minutes, which was baffling to see. And it gave a big spike of revival thing, and it's been going pretty strong ever since. Games are slow; they're only like 3 to 5 months long for like a single game. But for how slow the games are, it's a very lively server. Well, lively for how big it is. It's a fun community to be in, and it's enjoyable to play in.
So you're not exactly sure what caused the user spikes?
I believe it was just an invite being found or like on a different Polytopia server. I know that we had a second little spike of members when Diplotopia became a partner server,
Mm-hmm.
but the original spike, I believe it was determined that an invite link was found somewhere and was widely sent, but other than that, I'm not entirely sure.
I have a very good guess. That actually might have been me, though I cannot confirm. I asked around on Reddit, okay, there's this mod. Maybe I can get the Diplotopia link. He sent me a Diplotopia link. I got in. I had perms to invite, so I put it on my friendly Polytopia service collection. So that might have been me, though I'm not sure.
Interesting.
So
Interesting,
are
interesting.
you in a game right now?
So far, I am in, since the server was revived, I have been in every game but two, I think. And we've gone from game 24 to, I think, game 35 now. I've been playing in a few of them, and I'm in a lot right now. I've been in two games that were completed, one of which I won, which was my first ever game in the server. Then the second one I lost because of a funny decision me and two other people decided to do, which probably wouldn't have worked, but it was just the fun thing we wanted to do to try it, just as like a little joke game, I guess.
Do you remember the details?
The joke game, it was us playing as the Mongol horde. Basically, all of us were Umaji or Yadak, and the
Hmm.
premise of it was pretty much just an automatic declaration on every other person in the game, just going for there and kind of just attacking everybody, and that's pretty much what that game was.
Okay.
It didn't go well from start to finish. I myself had a pretty bad spawn in it, and as did someone else. Only one of us actually had a decent spawn. But throughout the game, we also had a Anger join the Mongol horde along with another Umaji. That was the game pretty much of just five people just kind of attacking everyone. Still losing because of it for reasons of me being almost wiped immediately by a barter that I spawned right next to, along with another barter who became a superpower, wiping out one of the Mongol members, and then we kind of slowly just lost after that.
Hmm. Are you in any other role-playing Polytopia Discord servers?
Other than Utop, no, as far as I know. I did join, I think, a D&D-esque Polytopia server just to see what it was like, but I haven't really done anything in it whatsoever.
Okay. You're a mod for the Diplotopia server. How did you get that?
I think it was offered to me when I was kind of just offering to help new members when they joined, I think, the second spike. And because I was really active on the server since then and was helpful towards newer members, along with trying to help with you whenever I could, I was offered to become a mod. But as of right now, it's not really much other than helping people when I can or offering feedback on things. Most of it is done by JB, who's kind of the owner, but not the owner of the server, since he kind of runs most of it as far as I can tell. He's the go-to person for asking about like game rules, like if there's a gray area, or creating game channels and all of that. I'm kind of just a little backup, I guess, or like a little helper if it's needed at all. But for the most part, it hasn't really been that big of a role to fill, I suppose.
For Polyelobot, you don't really use that. Is there a specific reason for that?
I think the reason I've never really gotten into it is just because I've been in a few, but it's not the most appealing thing, I guess. I'd rather just go in the games for fun instead of just doing it for any value. I think I'm in the Polybatter server, and I have been since it was made, like the day of its creation, I believe. But I just haven't really done anything with it because it's not the biggest thing on my mind to prove how good I am at the game or do stuff to get a higher ELO score, for example, to show how good I am at the game, or to try and get like a number higher to show that, I suppose.
There's
So
also
I haven't
unranked
really,
games.
yeah, that's true. But most of the time, whenever people do ELO games, from what I've seen at least, it's always been an ELO ranking. So I haven't really gotten that much into it, and I've been in a few of them. It's just not something I guess haven't done yet. I mean, I've thought about going into them, but I just haven't as of now. That's the best reason I can give. There really isn't one I can think of besides that. It's kind of just,
Hmm. You spend most of your time in Diplotopia then?
yeah, I spend a lot of my time in Diplotopia, but recently I have been going into Utah a bit more. I don't see myself becoming a hugely active person there, as in I check back every now and then and like offer feedback and stuff. It might change. I'll have to see what happens with it, just to see if I do think I'll enjoy being a part of it in the long term. I think I'll stick with it for a bit to see. I'm not sure yet.
You bothered to join the Simanti tribe, at least.
When I joined it, I saw there's a new Samantha tribe, and I was like, huh, I'm gonna join that because since Samantha has been released for the game, I have just loved the tribe and I love playing it. It's by far my favorite one just because of all the different mechanics that you can use to master. And for the same reason that I like Polaris, it's just a very different experience from all the other tribes, and it's even more so than that, which is why I love them. I've been decently active in the server recently, just because it's been a few interesting things to see of how the server runs and operates. You could compare it to Diplotopia, but a lot more loose and open, I feel. It's a lot less restricted. Well, not that Diplotopia is restricted anyway, I'm not trying to say that, but it's a lot more open in whatever you can say. And it's a lot more like,
Less traditional?
I don't know how to describe it. I guess you could think of it as Diplotopia is, for example, each game is its own separate game. They don't go into each other. And there are some guidelines in the server that don't be overly rude, don't throw out slurs and all that, for example. And in Utah, it's a lot more open in what you can say and how you can act. I mean, obviously things like slurs aren't approved upon, and it's not like something you can just readily do. I'm not suggesting that at all. But it's a lot more open in jokes you can make, for example, or what like you can say. Again, Diplotopia isn't strict like you can't say things. It's not like a banhammer will crack down on you like the second you say something like even remotely bad. Utah is a lot less restricting on that, I suppose, and the kind of like things you can joke about and what's considered to be okay to say and what's not, I think, is my best way of describing it.
Is Simanti your favorite tribe, or is it something else?
Before Semanti was released, it was Polaris, but ever since Semanti has been released into the game, it's definitely been my favorite tribe. I'm very happy that I was able to get a beta key to play Semanti early on Steam, and it was a lot of fun to play with it. I'm very happy that it when it came out to mobile because I could play it like on the go and not be restricted to my laptop at all. By far, I think the most fun tribe to play, along with, I mean, obviously, I've said that's my favorite one, so of course I'll think that, but it's just a super fun and different tribe to play, and I think that's why it's my favorite.
So when eventually the new special tribe will come out, that will be your favorite?
I don't know. When Aquarion came out, it wasn't really my favorite tribe just because I didn't really like the mechanics of it. It kind of just felt like another normal tribe, but riders and knights could go on water, and the crab and the super unit could also go on water. There wasn't like really that much difference to it for me. And it was the same with the Lyrion, of where it was cool a first bit when it came out because of dragons, but I was never really able to get into it. The only real cool mechanic that I brought into it was kind of the flying and Polytars, which are basically like a swordsman, but worse and weaker, in my opinion.
Good for rushing, though.
It is good for rushing early on, but it's in a weird boat that I like. You could group it up with Venger, of where they're on the same level of rushing, but for different reasons. Of where it's a bit easier to counter, but also a bit harder to counter since there's multiple of them. Whereas with Venger, it's easier to counter because there can be less of them, but it's harder to counter because they have more defense. Whereas with Polytars, they have a lot less defense, but more of them. It's like a weird version of Venger, where, I mean, I also haven't played it that much in a while, so I can't really say if it's better or worse than them. I
But
don't really play
fire
Venger or
dragons.
Illyrion, but that's just how I see it. With Polaris, it just felt like it was the first special tribe to me that introduced a lot of different and interesting mechanics, with freezing to making bridges on the ice, changing how units worked in ways other than like just allowing them to go into water, have a traditional melee knight unit become a ranged unit, giving that unit dash, the Gami's movement freeze into Moonies in general, along with battle sleds and ice fortresses. It just felt like it added a lot more diversity to the tribe that made it more special than Aquarion and Illyrion did. The Lyrion, for example, it's just Polytars and dragons that were a new thing that kind of made it special. And then for Aquarion, the only technically new units were just the Tridentians, which is, I guess, kind of just a range reskin of a knight, and the crab. Polaris to me kind of just felt like the first big content update overhaul throughout all of the Special Tribe updates. Semanti improved upon that, in which many people took it as overloading the tribe with special mechanics, but having there not been a content update for a year and a half since Polaris' release in terms of tribes, this was a huge new jump in mechanics that opened up a lot of new doors for future tribes. I feel that they can borrow from these mechanics, along with it just being a very interesting and different tribe in terms of like its background and how it's played, and along with the tech tree that is very different than what people are used to. The Navy tech is nothing like any other tribe, really. Farming is just completely thrown out the window, and Dumux is not having any form of persist or dash after attacking. The explosions, the boosting, where many people see it as a very densely packed mechanic to tribe, I see it as more of just a tribe that has many mechanics that you can use to make it amazing, and if you can't connect to those different strategies and changes in tech, it's not going to go well for you. People have said in the beta Discord, when it was still a beta on Steam, I remember that it feels very cluttered and compact, where in reality, to me at least, it feels more like it's ideas in the tribe that you just have to connect to make it into a few single ideas that really make the tribe what it is and make it make sense. And that's kind of why it's my favorite, because it's just a lot of new content that you can explore and play with and make new strategies off of. And it's probably the tribe that you can have the most strategies with to win it. Whereas going from naval rushes to land rushes to just going for pure eco and then having a crushing assault later on is just a lot more strategies to play with, much like there was with Polaris, where that wasn't really the case with Illyrion and Aquarion, for example. So for the next special tribe, your original question, which I kind of like went on a long run off of, if that will be my next favorite, I don't know. It kind of depends on if it'll be another special tribe like Aquarion or Illyrion, or there's not that much more content to them, room to play around with. Whereas with Semanti and Polaris, for example, it feels like there's a lot more ways to play and how you can play the game.
Do you have a least favorite tribe?
If I had to pick a least favorite tribe that isn't Wenger, obviously. Besides Wenger, I would probably have to say, I think it would be a tie between Umaji, Yadak, and Aquarion. I think would be my tie for my least favorite, I feel.
But what about Rhodes?
The Yadak start with Rhodes. I like it, but I think the reason that I don't like them is because I found that the only two techs that they really have, or resources in their empire that they usually have a lot of, is fruit and farming, just from my own personal experience. And even then it was like very scattered around and random. And I feel like I started to dislike them because it made expansion very fast, but because of that, and with you only needing like a few techs to expand in, it felt like Imperious with Rhodes, I guess, to me, is what it felt like. Imperious with Rhodes, except instead of animals and fruit, you'd have farms and fruit. It just wasn't that fun of a tribe for me after a while. It's kind of like the same copy-paste start, how I've seen it.
Do you have a favorite strategy?
Overall, I think I base my strategy for things off of spawn. I don't have a go-to for each game, but I do have a few that I would always have in the back of my head that I like to employ. Polaris, for example, I would usually go for like a heavy Ice Archer and Gami with Riders combination, because early on that was very devastating to have your entire army frozen and then just have Riders just beat back and forth and just kind of pile up after a while. For Semanti, my always strategy for them is to always find coastal cities as fast as possible, no matter what, purely because you need to kind of get a Reichi baseline going on very quickly if you don't want to be smashed by a battleship spam immediately. Because if other tribes get to a navy before you, it's very hard to be able to actually fight them on naval grounds. But if you can get there at the same time or before them, it makes it a lot more balanced and even in Semanti's favor at times. The more coastal cities that you have, the more Clathruses you can get to boost your economy, and the more Reichis you can get out and start to beat back battleship spamming. Which I do feel like that was their intention with Reichis, is to kind of try and counter a battleship spam with their explosion. which I like, and I think it's what they were intending to do with it. I still feel like the Cementi Navy is a bit weak at times, but
Mm-hmm.
especially against tribes like Kiku, for example. But it's not the worst, and it's very doable to survive with, I feel. They did a good job with it, but I still feel like they could add like that little bit more to it to make it a bit better. But that's just my own personal opinion on it.
The little bit more would be.
I don't really know. I think bounce around ideas, and the beta Discord for Polytopia was everything ranging from allowing Regis to carry units to, I think it was also a mention of another type of naval unit. I really don't know. I just feel like something's lacking there, and it's fine how it is. I'm not saying it's bad. Like they did a good job with it. I just feel like there's a little piece of it that's missing somewhere in there that I could never really quite put my finger on. I'm really not entirely sure what that could be. It's just the feeling that I have that something is, in my opinion.
What's the most memorable game you ever played?
The one game in particular that I can very clearly remember was when I was playing against a few people in an online game. I was playing as Polaris, and the most memorable thing that I can very clearly remember of like all of my poly games was freezing an entire nation's army in a bottleneck and then slowly working around and then just freezing them all in general. And then just going through that. It was basically just they couldn't make any more units because they were all frozen and I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
killing them at all. So I was working against other people. And the game for them was kind of just frozen shut. They couldn't really do anything and I kind of just held them hostage there. And then eventually just slowly worked my way through their forces and took them over. That is my most memorable game purely because it shows how if you play Polaris right, you can just completely wipe out many players like in many scenarios. And I've seen that bounced around a lot, actually. Many people have said one of the only tribes that they're scared of is a good Polaris player or like a really good Polaris player because freezing in the right hands is just a very, very, very scary thing.
Mm-hmm. How many games are you usually in at once?
I think my highest has been around 12, but because people either like not taking turns or like timers just being egregiously low, they kind of drag out to a point of where like I forget which one's which, so I kind of leave it. I think right now I'm only in 4 random games that like is consistently a turn a day, and I don't really want to go above that purely because it just gets bogged down in which game is which and how slow they can be. Sometimes you kind of like forget that they even existed, for example. So I like to try and keep it a small number at this point. And then along with Diplo games that I'm in a lot of, I try and keep it lower so that I don't accidentally think a Diplo game is a normal game or a normal game is a Diplo game.
Mm-hmm. I take it your favorite part of the Polytopia Discord is the Diplotopia server?
Definitely, it's a very fun community and it's a very fun way to play the game. I feel many people are turned down by it because of the role playing aspect of it, but it's not as heavy as people think it is, and it's not as hard as it might seem. I think a lot of people are also turned off by how the rules sound because they do sound a bit complicated at first read through, when in reality, once you kind of play a game and see how the rules would actually be in place, it's a lot less scary than it looks like it is, and it's a lot more of a relaxed and tame environment than I think some people might see it as. Many people have joined the server then left, which presumably after reading through the rules, or which I'm guessing is most usually what happens. People read through the rules and think that it's not for them when they were interested in the server because of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the rules just look a lot scarier than they are for like how the game is played, and people can just be turned off by that because they don't think it's like they think it's a lot harder than it is to actually play in it. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite server, and I definitely see myself being there for a long time.
Okay. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you for choosing to interview me. Was your choice to ask me to be interviewed just a random thing, or?
Only partially. I go through people and see, oh, this person, they look kind of interesting, look a little deeper. Oh, yeah, this person's possibly a good fit, and then go from there.
Okay, that makes sense.
More details in my interview.
Thank you for the interview.
Yep. See you around.
See you around.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
As always, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share it. For the text version, you can join my Discord in the description. I also have a YouTube channel where I play 1v1s and occasionally do tutorials. We'll be back next week. Bye!